sorry it had to be done. I wanted to make it a momentous occasion. But if you recognize that song, you're as old as I am. Hey, how's your back feeling today?
Okay, for this video, I'm trying something a little bit different. I've decided to figure out how to do timestamps, or I believe if you go anywhere down here, you should be able to find the timestamp of the item that you might want to see. I recommend that you just watch the video from beginning to end, but it is going to be a little long, so it's going to be there for your watching and viewing pleasure. So do what you want to do. Have a good time. Well, I finally reached that magical time. It's time for the installation of the Killshot. Stick around and see how this one goes. So the very first thing that the Killshot paperwork manual says to do before you do anything else to the car actually is to find a 12 volt source that gives you 12 volts during cranking, throughout cranking, and also when you have it in the run position. So that was the first thing we really needed to do, and the best thing I could have done is not tear into the fuel system before actually trying to accomplish that. So now what I ended up having to do is put my open fuel line, attach a hose to it and put it into a catch can. So you might want to try this before you touch anything, all right? So a 12 volt source that gives you 12 volts during run position and cranking position. So what you need the most for that is a trusty multimeter, and then you're gonna have to go to town trying to figure that out. I actually got lucky because I remembered when I installed my Edelbrock carburetor, I actually put a automatic choke on it, and the automatic choke, according to the Edelbrock manual, says to find a 12 volt source that is good during cranking and while in the run position. So actually, if I check on this wire leading to my automatic choke here, my electric choke, then that might actually be the wire that I need in order to get going. Let's find out. All right, let's take this off, take that off. And I've already disconnected the wire. It's the one that goes right here onto the electric choke. We're gonna give that a test. Meter in there. I'm going to put the negative on the battery, and we're going to put it onto voltage, and we're going to see what we get. Go ahead and put it in the run position. There we got 12 volts. So obviously that it works in the run position. Go ahead and crank it for a minute. Go ahead and stop. And there you go. 9 volts minimum during the time that we're actually cranking. Crank it one more time. I think that's a winner. The first thing we're going to do, according to the instructions, is take a look at the carburetor and make note of all your vacuum lines. Are they going to ported or are they going to straight manifold vacuum? Make note of that. After you've made note of that, disconnect everything and remove the carburetor. Now that that's done, I can move on to installing the Killshot unit. The Killshot actually comes with a gasket so that you can install it onto the manifold directly, but I actually like using a spacer just because I'm used to it, and I also like the way that it looks standing out a little bit more from the engine. So I had to go buy another one of these. Funny how Edelbrock likes to charge you about $20 for one of these, where a Felpro, which is just as good, is $2.99. So there you go. Something for you to note though, before you do this, is that the gasket that the Killshot comes with is directional. It has notches at the front and the back, or in this situation, the top and the bottom. It goes like that. The reason for that is because the Killshot itself also has notches on its base at the front and the rear. So make sure you install this correctly. It is not in the instructions. So, problem number one. The Killshot doesn't sit in here nicely. I absolutely need this riser, apparently, but the riser isn't tall enough. So, I'm either going to have to go out and get a taller riser, which I don't really want to do, And because the problem here is that I have, and I'm not sure you can see it on camera right now, but I actually have a T right here coming straight out of my manifold vacuum. And it goes connected to it's a vacuum line that goes down to my transmission. I have a 2-speed power glide, by the way, and that is original. And the other one is this big giant line that comes out of my exhausted oil canister. So I'm not really sure if it's the actual T that's causing the issue, or if it's actually the hose is so dang thick that it's actually making the Killshot not lay flat. So now I'm gonna have to see if I remove this hose, if the Killshot will actually lay flat, and if so, we'll see what I can do. I could just redivert this somewhere else. So as you can see right here at the back of my manifold, this is where this fitting went. And as you can see from that, this thing is quite hefty. So the Killshot, being that it had a really large bowl on the front and in the back, it just kept getting in the way and it wouldn't seat all the way on top of the flange nicely. So 2 hours later, I ended up coming back from Home Depot with one of these. This is a square head plug. This is brass. It's basically a 3/8 pipe plug. That's NPT. It should fit in there just nicely. So I applied a little bit of thread tape and nice and snug, and we'll tighten that down and we'll finally get the Killshot in there. So whereas before this fitting used to house a couple of my vacuum lines, I'm going to delete it and the vacuum lines will go straight into the Killshot, and we'll go into that later. Now finally that the plug is installed and there's nothing that's going to get in the way of the big bowls of the Killshot, we could put it in. One of the things that I'm not going to install on it is the through bolts or the mounting bolts that it came with. The reason being is because I have the spacer, my original bolts are actually taller and they're perfect for this application. So if you guys are ever going to do what I did and tear apart an entire car and put it back together again, I can't begin to recommend enough one of these assembly manuals. So this one's specific to my Camaro, and I used it like you wouldn't believe. In this manual, it has every kind of code you can imagine, every different model of vehicle and how it was assembled, and it shows you step by step how everything goes together in case you ever forget how to do it. Now, because we're installing the Killshot, I don't know what the torque specifications are to get the Killshot into position because the manual actually didn't include it. So what I did is I went to my assembly manual. The assembly manual is telling me that it's anywhere from 14 to 18 foot-pounds for these nuts that hold the Killshot in place. However, that's an aluminum intake manifold, and the original one was steel, and that's an aluminum Killshot, and the original one was also steel. So we are going to go to the low range of this, and I'm going to do 14 foot-pounds just to make sure that, well, we don't want to break anything. So once upon a time, I actually worked at Boeing, and I was an inspector over some of the mechanics. So one of the things that they teach you at Boeing is if you're going to be torquing something, I know how it is with a shade tree guys and even car mechanic guys. You go in there and you hear your first click on the torque wrench, and you're like, oh, okay, let's double check and then give it another click. What happens is at Boeing, they train you that second click, you've already gone too far. So the first click, as you go nice and smooth, once you feel the click, then that is the appropriate torque. When you give it a second click, what ends up happening is you have to over torque it in order to break that bond, that binding of the nut, and then it breaks loose and then you get another click and now you've over torqued it. So don't do that. Stop on the first click. So according to the instructions, the next thing I should be tackling is the hole for the O2 sensor. But I'm going to skip that over because right now I can be concentrating on this area, and I'll take care of that in a little while. The next thing after that is to replace the water temperature sensor with the one that comes with the ACES EFI kit. I'm going to be removing this sense wire that it came with and probably curlicue it and stick it out of the way up against the firewall. I'm not going to get rid of this because you never know. So problem number 2. The water temp sensor finally came out. It's not the same size as the new one. The thread size is way different. So Now I got to go back to the store and find an adapter for the water temperature sensor that comes with the ACES EFI kit. My manifold had 2 locations where I could have put this in on, right? So it turns out both locations are the exact same size as the original water temp sensor, which means that this doesn't work on either one of them. Is that the case with everybody else's manifolds? Did ACES just not think about this? I don't really know, but I wish I had known that I was going to need an adapter for this when I was out doing other stuff and buying that plug for the rear of it. But now I'm going to have to make my second trip to the store. Yeah, wish I had known that before I had gone on out. But again, I'm trying to do this step by step. Live and learn. Now you guys know, and you won't make the same damn mistake. Well, it's now 3 days later, and I can honestly say that this temperature sensor here has been the bane of my existence. So I realized earlier, like I said, it doesn't fit into the 1/2-inch hole that the original temperature sensor came out of on this Edelbrock EPS manifold. This thing is a 3/8. Now, I thought, for sure, I'll just go out, Home Depot, and buy myself a reducer, or actually an enlarger, it's an adapter, to go from the 3/8 to the 1/2-inch hole. So I go over there and I actually took my sensor with me. And it turns out that I couldn't get the sensor to even fit 1 thread onto that adapter. So I thought to myself, maybe I'm wrong, it's not NPT threads. What can they possibly be? So I started going to other places. I started hitting up plumbing companies, other things like Lowe's. I tried everything because in the past I had used an adapter that's just regular NPT brass adapter, and I figured brass, okay, fine, not the greatest thing in the universe, but this is brass too, so how bad can it be? And I couldn't get a single thread to catch, nowhere. So then I actually went to the auto parts store and I asked them for their adapters for 3/8 to 1/2. And before I even bought it, I opened it up and I tried it out, and guess what? It didn't fit either. Not even 1 thread would catch. So I didn't know what the deal was. So I came back home, and what I ended up having to do is I decided, well, what if I remove the sealant that it comes with already pre-installed on the threads? Because when I took a closer look at it under a camera, the sealant was taking up more than half of the depth of each individual thread. So I thought maybe that's the problem. I actually spent an hour with a plastic scraper removing all of the sealant from the threads, and then cleaned it off with a little brass brush just to get everything out of there. And then I went back to the auto parts store thinking, okay, it's got to be the auto parts store. And guess what? Then it went in only about 2 or 3 threads, and then it started to bottom out with a lot of this sticking out. So I ended up having to go to Summit Racing. Summit Racing, I picked up an adapter. Now this one's aluminum, and guess what? When you start threading it in, it catches better, and it only goes about halfway in before it bottoms out. Well, it becomes really, really tight. Now here's my problem with this, and my concern. When you put it in, if I were to install it onto the adapter first and shove it into the hole, and the water level is low, the adapter keeps the sensor well inside. Does it create a pocket of air in which then we have problems with the readout? I don't know. I know some of you guys have been saying that you've been having issues with this thing reading correctly, like a few degrees off, and I'm wondering, is that the case? Is that what you guys are going through? So I'm starting to wonder, should I put the adapter in the hole first and then fill the cavity with coolant and then put in the sensor so that there's no air pocket? I don't really know. I might just do that, but it would be better if I put the sensor into the adapter first, I think, and then the whole thing into the hole, because I don't want to have this fully engaged, the adapter fully engaged, and then drive in this thing where it just binds so dang easily. What gives? It just seems wrong to me, but we'll go at it right now. Holy smokes. I actually had to remove the plugs that are on this side, on the driver's side of the Killshot, because I'm going to be plumbing in my fuel system from the driver's side. So the plugs came out so that I can move everything over there and actually basically swap them. What a beast it was to remove these things. I'm actually lucky I didn't booger them up. These things took a lot of elbows grease to remove just to get them going, and I was actually afraid that I would screw them up or strip them or just like mar them in one way or another, because they put Loctite on these in order to make them stay there without leaking. I totally get that. I'm very much appreciative, but I'm pretty sure because of the color of them that they used red Loctite. And red Loctite, at least in aviation, red Loctite is the strongest Loctite you can put on something. It's for things that are not meant to come apart. And that looks like red Loctite. I would have used blue, but they did come off. So now I'm going to swap them over, since my FiTech Mini is on the driver's side, and plumb it in from that direction. Alright, so let's discuss and have a little primer here on what kind of Loctite you should be using probably. So the highest of the strengths is usually red Loctite. Red Loctite is meant for high vibration areas, which yes, this is a high vibration area, but it's also meant to be applied to fittings that you don't ever intend to remove again. That's red Loctite. Followed by green Loctite. Green Loctite is also a high strength Loctite, but it has high wicking ability, so it'll actually draw in, and it's a little bit better in some ways than red Loctite, but again, high wicking, high strength, and it's most likely in situations also where you also do not intend to remove your fittings. The best overall actually is blue Loctite. Blue Loctite is a medium strength Loctite in which you can apply it to areas in which they're important, but also you might actually need to remove them in the future. The least useful Loctite is purple. Purple Loctite is actually meant, it's low strength, but it's meant for applications where they're not high vibration, not important applications, and you know for sure you're going to be removing them soon. So that's what you should be knowing, and blue Loctite is most likely your go-to Loctite. After I've chosen where it is that I'm going to have my port fittings go and they have been installed, the other thing I'm going to do, now that I have a great opportunity to do it, is install this awesome little kit that came to me free from ACES. This here is that kit that if you were on your game, nice sticker, you would have gotten this free fuel pressure sensing kit from ACES, and all you had to do was give them screenshots of 3 days worth of shares in either Facebook or Instagram of ACES products. Here you go, $140 kit. I have it for free now. Thank you, ACES. I really appreciate it. This is the kind of stuff that builds customer loyalty, and I think a lot of us appreciated it. Thanks again. So let's put this bad boy in right now. Now I'm going to start planning as to where my wire harness is going to sit with all the relays, the fuses, and the ECU. I could mount it straight onto the wheel well, but if I do that, I'm going to have a lot of screws and things sticking down into my wheel well area. Not sure that's such a good idea. Probably nothing will happen to that, but you never know. So I decided I'm going to try to make a mounting plate. We'll see how that goes. I might actually use the mounting plate, or I might not. In the meantime, if I am going to try to make one, because I happen to have a couple of spare pieces of aluminum. So what I did first is I decided to use some cardboard and lay out where the heck it is that I think I want it to go. So I want it to sit here, and basically here's what I'm planning on doing. If I set it up this way, make some tabs, basically legs for mounting, I can do one leg up against here, one leg up against here also, which shouldn't stick out into the wheel well area, and then two mounting positions, one down low, two down low, and that should give me plenty of support for this. That means that I'm only going to have two things sticking out into the wheel well, which will make me a little bit happier. The rest of it, all the screws and all the mounting things, and I'm going to try to use some Rivnuts, I'm going to put on this plate, and that way nothing will get in the way. Wish me luck. And we're pretty much done now with the bracket. I did decide to go with an all aluminum bracket since I had the parts to do it. This is what it ended up looking like. It's actually not too bad at all. I'm kind of happy with the way it came out. As you could tell, I rounded off all the edges and I sanded down the edges too, so in order to make sure that I don't slice myself in the future. So here's the original template that I had, and it's made out of cardboard. I
taped on some tabs as to where I thought they should be. As you can see right here, the ECU will sit right there, and followed by the 2 fuses and then the 2 fan relays, even though I'm not going to be using them. So there you go. And what I did is I made the cardboard and I decided where it was going to sit, where I liked it. And here's my final product. I traced it out of sheet metal. This is 80 thousandths aluminum, and I bent it. And again, I don't have a brake. I don't have a sheet metal shear. So what I did is I actually traced it and I cut it out with a jigsaw, fine-tooth jigsaw, and then I bent the edges inside of my vise. And that's it. I added a little bit of heat in order to make sure I didn't crack them while I bent them, because it's such a thick piece of sheet metal. And there you go. I decided to go with mounting brackets. So this is mounted to the car, as is the other side, and then I have a bolt here and there, and then I also have one here and one there. So in the future, the 2 mounting tabs will stay on the car, and if I have to remove the entire assembly, I just remove this upper bolt, that upper bolt, and the 2 lower bolts, and the entire assembly will come out. What I have to do now is basically put down my my components on top of it, mark where the holes are going to be, and then I will drill the holes so that I can put in some nutserts. So these rivet nuts or nutserts I bought online out of Amazon, and actually they weren't too bad. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't too bad either. And they come with a whole bunch of different sizes. Now, I chose the machine bolts, these M numbered ones. They accept machine bolts. The reason why is because the bolts that come with the ECU are actually machine bolts. So I had to buy M5, M6s in order to be able to do the mounting correctly. Now, because I ended up going with machine bolt nutserts, that means that basically everything else has to be machine bolt. So all of these are machine bolts. I decided to go with M6s for the mounting bolts, and then I will use my M5 nutserts for mounting the components onto the plate. Okay, that's installed now. I've actually polished it a little bit in order to make it look a little nicer. One of the things you guys got to keep in mind is with these nutserts, don't over torque your bolts on there. Just make them nice and tight. Don't overdo it, because if once those nutserts start to spin, you're going to have a really bad day. If you want, you can actually apply a little bit of Loctite to them, but remember, nothing too strong or you're never going to get them back off again. And here's the final product and what it looks like in the engine bay. It's actually not too bad. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. As you can see here, the nutserts, or Rivnuts, however you guys want to call them, are actually nice and firm, and I bought some bolts in order to go with everything. Now, if you're going to do these things, here's my recommendation. There are tons of videos, and I'm not going to post right now how I did this. I'm not going to show a tutorial because there's a ton of videos on YouTube on how to install these without a tool. And you could do it with some extra bolts and some nuts and some washers. Please look those up. Check them out. It's actually really easy, but here's my recommendation for you, that you buy extra bolts, washers, and nuts. Because after 2 or 3 of these inserts, you'll end up finding that you're either going to strip the bolt or damage the nut, or the washers are going to become all scuffed up and they won't spin as nicely. So give that a go. They're not too expensive. Right on. So I stretched out the wire harness, and this is going to be a trial fit when it comes to the back of the engine compartment, because I'm not going to mount it permanently at the moment. I just want to get my electronics onto my mounting bracket, and after that I'll figure out what my routing is going to be. So first thing I'm going to start off with is these rubber isolators that come with the ACES EFI kit. Just spin them on. There we go. Now, the ECU. So I'm going to mount my ECU sideways with the plugs facing forward. The reason for that is on my application here, the wire harness is long enough that I need to loop it back around. It would have been too tight, and it would have hit the A-arms if I had dangled it downward or upward. And you don't want really these plugs to be aiming upward anyway, so either forward and back or down. Preferably down, but in my application, this is the way I had to go. Okay, once that's installed, we're going to be doing this wiring, and I have enough room here for both of the relays and both of the fuses. So let's get that done next. like a glove. Here we go. Everything's installed. Plugs are in. I'm just going to dangle this out of the way, but basically this wire, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the roll. I don't want to get rid of, cut off any wire that I don't need to, but the positive and the negative will go to the positive and negative terminals of the battery. Once I put those in, do not install the battery until you're done with all the wiring. And then we have over here our ignition key line, and we'll show you where that goes later. Other than that, the only other wire over here is the one that goes to the fuel pump. In my case, the Mini from FiTech.
Well, at this point, I'm down to wire harness completion. So the last thing I have to do is, apart from hooking up the O2 sensor, the last thing I have to do is figure out which wires I need to hook up on the loose wires connector, which would be this one. Okay, so here's the deal. I don't have AC in the car yet. V-main is really not used. It's for something in the future. It provides voltage for the future. I think rev is for rev limiter, if I remember right. I don't have one of those, nor am I running nitrous, and I definitely do not have electric fans. Point is basically, I think, is if you're going to do timing control, which I am not doing timing control, and VR I still need to look into, but I believe actually, according to this wiring diagram, when it comes to, and this is my situation here, so VR right here is not used. So really, the only thing I really need is the coil negative tech-in input. So I'm going to take this entire bunch of wires, and instead of depinning it where it might void my warranty or something like that, I'm going to cap the ends, and I'm just going to grab the gray lead for coil negative and hook that up to my coil. And that should be it.
So I finished most of the wiring over here and setting everything up in this mounting plate. I'm going to put a little bracket right here to hold on to the remaining wire for my positive and negative leading to the ECU and to the wire harness, because I don't really want to cut it. So I'm just going to store it. I don't really care that it doesn't look fantastic. This is not a show car. It's just a driver, and I'd rather have the extra bit of wire so I don't have to splice in the future. From there, I'm running my pump positive wire. Now, I ran the pump positive wire paralleling the negative that goes over to my FiTech Mini, which is over there. But as you can see, it comes up about 3 feet short. So what I did is I went through an American Auto Wire kit that I did because I redid the entire wiring on the car when I had it torn apart. So I found some extra wire, and I am going to splice it and continue my run. Now, this I believe is 14 gauge. It's 14 gauge what it comes with. This is 12 gauge. So the reason why I'm going to up the size is because I'm hoping that I have less voltage drop, okay? Because of the extra length. I really don't know how it functions with the system, so I don't want there to be a voltage issue. So that's why I'm going to up the size of the wire. And I'm going with pink, even though this is kind of a pinkish orange. Should be good enough. We'll give it a go. Oh, when you attach these things, what I'm going to end up using is not automotive crimps, okay? Not automotive splices. I am going to be using an environmental splice. I don't know if you can see that. These little environmental splices will get crimped, and then I'm going to solder them into place. Once you do that, the environmental splice comes with an environmental sleeve that you heat shrink on top of it. And that should protect my wiring probably forever. Something you have to keep in mind though is if you're going to use environmental splices, they're usually used for aviation a lot. You're going to have a specialty crimper. These are environmental splice crimpers, all right? They are not your everyday average off-the-shelf Home Depot crimpers. So keep that in mind. You might want to just solder them in place and be done with it, and then just put a little bit of heat shrink on top.
So let's catch up as to what we've already done. So I've already brought in the pink wire here. I put a little bit of tape over it so that I don't touch the poles by accident, because we're not supposed to hook this up until after we prime the Mini. Okay, it has to be full of fuel. So the wire has been spliced in, and I went through the core support underneath. It comes out over here. This is that orangey pink wire that goes to pump positive on the wire harness that the ACES comes with. So all the electronics have been mounted. I've just coiled here with an 8L clamp the remaining red and black wire that goes to battery positive and negative. And over here we have, this is the ignition line. That's that red line that needs to have 12 volts. So I'm running it with the wire bundle up across here, through here. And I've coiled the remaining here. I'm not going to chop it off. Again, I don't like to do that. But what we are going to have to do is another environmental splice right here. And this other red wire that comes out, this is the one that goes to my ignition source that gives me the 12 volts. On the other side, it attaches back here somewhere to the fuse box. So anyway, that's what we got going right now. And once we have that done, we'll have our ignition done, and pretty much most of the wiring will be done. The coil end over here from the wire harness, that goes to nothing unless you're running timing control. I am not running timing control, so that's just going to dead end right there. Also, the VR goes to absolutely nothing according to the wiring diagram that ACES has sent me. So once we hook this up, that'll be done. Then I'm going to hook up right here the coil negative wire over to my coil's negative side, and that should probably be most of the wiring. Amazing. The only thing left is for me to figure out a hole to drill in the firewall where I can put my CAN cable. And then that should be it. So now it's time to tackle the filter installation that goes from the FiTech Mini over to the Killshot. I actually decided to change a few things around. I actually put the pressure sensor that I got as a free kit on this side, so it's all going to go in through one. The reason why I moved it from the far side is because over here, since it wasn't going to have an outlet, I was concerned that there was going to be an air pocket maybe, and then I wouldn't get very good reading, or maybe some kind of an error. So I moved it over here and sent the wire around to the back side over here. So yeah, it's nice and firm on here. So I moved everything around, and this time I applied all of the plugs with blue Loctite. So now it's time for this thing. Make sure you follow the direction of the arrow. So FiTech symbol is going to be upside down on this side. It was apparently meant for the passenger side. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be installing probably, I'm going to see how it looks. It's either going to be a straight shot or a 45 degree. I have the 45 degree that came for the FiTech Mini, and I have a 45 degree that came with the pressure sensor kit. So now I have two. So I'm thinking 45 degrees out of the FiTech Mini, come down low, 45 degrees off of here, come down low, and over to the filter over here. And if not, I have straight ends that I can use instead. I'm going to be attaching the FiTech filter. This is the 10 micron. I'm going to be attaching it right here, and I think I'm going to grab onto it instead of on the filter housing itself. I'm going to be attaching onto the tubing with these non-insulated steel 8L clamps. We'll see how this one goes. I'm ready to mount this thing now. I think I'm going to put the first clamp over here on this side. Let me see if you can see it past this pink cable. We're going to put it right here, and I'm going to be driving them in with self-tapping screws. And the reason for that is because here I don't have too much of concern because I have my A-arms right here. If I had put them up here, the reason why I didn't do it over there to my electronics is because here the wheel travels right here, and I wouldn't want my tire to actually hit one of these screws sticking straight out. But here, I don't think I'm going to have an issue, so I'm just going to drive it in. Okay, so I temporarily fit in my little elbow right here loosely so that I can bend it and figure out how I want to run this. I was thinking straight down, but that looks kind of hokey. You can't tell right now, but it's doing this weird bend right here. So it looks like it might have to be at a slight angle.
and we'll just curve it real nicely. Right about there. So I'll make my cut right here using one of these cutters. That looks like it's going to be just about right. And there we are, finally. The final installation of the plumbing from the FiTech Mini over to the ACES EFI. The pressure side comes out of the red port in the middle through my 10 micron filter from FiTech around into this T. The T has my fuel pressure sending unit where it's now been wired, so it has my coolant temperature sensor. It comes through here, fills up my bowls. We should be ready to go. All I gotta do is tighten these down a little bit more and we're good. Okay, in order to install the gauge, you're gonna need a 5mm Allen wrench and remove the plug from in here. Have your gauge ready. I put a little bit of Teflon tape on there, although there's already some pipe dope inside of there, so either way. Oh, and in order to tighten this out, you're actually going to need an 11mm wrench for the nut at the bottom of the gauge. It's done. Do not hook up the positive cable to the Mini until after you've primed the pump.
We've made it to the point now where we have to install the O2 sensor, and for that we're going to have to drill a hole. In ACES' manual we're given this oh so helpful little picture that basically gives you no measurements and no angles. All it says is ensure the sensor is located at the approximate angle shown above. But what is that angle? In order to figure it out, what I ended up having to do is extend the lines on the manual and then put a protractor up against it. What I ended up getting was 15 degrees. But where exactly on the outside edge of my pipe is 15 degrees? It's not as though I can cut the pipe in half and put a protractor on it. So first things first, what we need to figure out is what the lowest point is of our pipe in order to have a starting point. What I ended up doing was using a laser level and coming up from below, and when the laser actually hit the pipe, that was my lowest point, and I marked it. Right on. So I hope you're ready and you have your high school geometry math hat on, because we're going to math the living crap out of this. Here you can see a cross section of a pipe. If you're starting at the bottom end and you go up 90 degrees, then you know at 90 degrees that's the center of your pipe. So if we now add the 15 degrees to original 90 degrees, that gives us 105 degrees. The problem is, what's that distance? What is the distance from the bottom of 105 degrees? What we do now is have to figure out what the circumference is of our exhaust pipe. So if we multiply the diameter of our pipe times pi, which is 3.14, this is what we end up getting. If you have a 3-inch exhaust, you're going to end up with a circumference of 9.42 inches. If it's a 2.5, 7.85 inches. And if it's a 2-inch exhaust pipe, your circumference is going to be 6.3 inches. Now that we figure that out, we need to figure out what the distance is from the bottom. So if a circle has 360 total degrees all the way around, we need to figure out what a 105 degree distance is. So what we do is we take the length of each of the circumferences that we figured out what it was depending on the size of our pipe, and we divide that by 360. So if you have a 3-inch pipe, each degree is 0.026 inches, and so on. And now that we know what each individual degree is depending on our pipe, what we have to do is multiply by 105 in order to get that total length. So a 3-inch pipe is going to give you 2.73 inches. A 2.5-inch pipe is going to give you 2.31 inches, and a 2-inch pipe is going to give you 1.89 inches from the bottom. In order to simplify your life though, what you should do is round up. Don't round down, because if you do, you'll be under 15 degrees. A little bit higher is not a problem. So now you know your distance. What does that give you? Here's what you do. Lay out a piece of tape flat, and what you're going to do is you're going to cut it to the exact length that you need for your diameter pipe. Then you're going to put the tape underneath where you marked your lowest point of the pipe and just go straight up. Where that tape ends, mark that spot. That's where you drill. Come on, you know that was fun. You gotta love math.
The FiTech Mini has been plumbed in now. Everything's attached. The coolant sensor, the fuel pressure sensor. The wires are going around through the bottom and towards the back over there. I've already hooked up the brake booster. The brake booster comes around through the back and attaches to one of the 3/8 fittings down here for manifold pressure or manifold vacuum. This one right here is my shortened one for that oil catch can that I was talking about. The other little manifold vacuum port is going to my transmission. That's this little metal tube right here. The only other port is the ported vacuum that should go over to my distributor. But as per the instruction, it's capped right here, and I'm leaving this unattached until after the first run. As you can see here, I'm deadheading right into the Killshot. I've had to go out and buy a cap because the kit does not come with a cap and it comes with 2 open ports. So I had to buy a cap in order to close that off. The other 2 come with the caps that come with the Killshot, and that's where I put those. And the sensor has been hooked up here, and I think that's pretty much everything. Okay, there's only 2 remaining things to do to finish off the fuel injection inside of the engine bay. One thing is to drill the hole for the display CAN cable, and the other thing is I had to, and I forgot about this, that's why I disconnected it now, I removed the return line from the FiTech Mini, because what we need to do is we need to fill that sucker up, and do not run the FiTech Mini until after it's been filled. So the only way you're going to know whether it's been filled or not is to remove that line. We'll reattach it once it's full. Well, here we are by the pedals of the car inside, and I found this tiny little hole here that used to belong to this old bracket. This bracket used to be part of the ducting from the original air conditioning, but you could see here how it kind of fell apart. So I don't really need this bracket anymore. And I was thinking maybe I should put the hole for the CAN cable for the little diaphragm right here. However, when I looked inside of the engine compartment, I realized that right behind this hole, about 3 to 4 inches forward of that, is the exhaust manifold. So I'm not sure I want to put it there. I'm thinking what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the screw back in there so I don't have an open hole to the engine bay, and I'm probably going to go about 3 or 4 inches up where there's absolutely nothing up there, and I'm going to drill a hole. I'm going to have to go buy a grommet because the one that comes with the kit is about, I don't know, an inch and a half or something. It's humongous. So what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go buy a 3/4 of an inch grommet. They're about $5 at the local auto parts store from Dorman. And I'm going to have to drill that out and put it in there. Because the only thing that I'm running into here, into the cab from the engine compartment, is the CAN cable for the display. Now, I don't have a 1/2 inch drill, but I do have one of these step drills. So I'm going to start off with a small hole. After I center punch it with my spring-loaded center punch, and then taper my way up until I get to my 1/2 inch hole. Or, I'm sorry, 3/4 inch hole. And then I should be done with all the wiring. Yay me!
Here's where I truly lucked out. The O2 sensor was going to go on the passenger side because I thought that would be the best place for it. But you can see right here that the collector for the long tube headers that I have is longer on the passenger side than it is on the driver's side. This causes a really bad unforeseen problem because you can see there that there's an adapter from the collector back, and that adapter is a whopping 1 1/4 inches long. After that comes an extension piece. The extension piece is 7 inches long, and unfortunately it lands right where that cross member is that you see here. So if you see, there's not enough room to put the sensor, even if I wanted to put it on the adapter from the collector. And then there's overlap where the pipes fit into each other right after that. And then I have my ginormous cross member for my transmission, and then I have another bit of overlap. Then it hits this bend for my X pipe. So really the only place for me to put it on the passenger side would be 16 inches back after it has made the bend radius towards the X. That's 16 inches. That's beyond what ACES wants. I called them up, and they basically had no solution. Their only solution was, hey, you need to weld one in. Well, that's great, but where? there's a lot of overlap. The only gap I have is right there in front of the cross member, and there's two pipes that overlap there. That's not the best place to go welding in a bung. So sadly I ended up removing all of that before I even realized what the problem was, and then I contacted ACES. So as you can see from this picture though, what I hadn't realized at the time is that the driver's side header is actually shorter and I have more real estate to work with. Right in front of the cross member there is a small space where I can install the bung, and that's where it's going to be. But unfortunately the next few scenes that you're going to see is how I took the measurements and stuff off of the passenger side. So bear with me, but understand that what I ended up doing was installing the bung on the driver's side and just running the wire, and there is plenty of wire. Just I ran it over from the passenger side across the cross member and over to the driver's side.
Okay, here's where I was talking about how to mark the lowest level. Now I've already disconnected it, so it's going to be slightly off because I've already loosened everything and it's dangling a little lower than before. But here is the mark that I had made for the lowest point on the exhaust. So, and then I've also marked with little hash marks, you can see right there and over here, as to how to realign this again so that I know that it's 100% straight from when I took the measurement. At the spot that I wanted my sensor, right there is where the laser barely grazes it. It just starts right there where it starts to actually focus on that. So yeah, like I said, it's a little off right now because it is dangling lower and at an angle from where it was before when I took the measurement, but it actually should work just fine. Once I remove this piece, then I will put it on the bench and use a piece of tape just like I explained earlier, and get my correct measurement as to where that sensor should be. So here you see that I took off the driver's side adapter that goes from, well, here's the flange that goes from my collector and then it hooks up to my X pipe. So I've already marked it. Here is roughly where the bung needs to be at this length away. And I've marked my low spot right here. So this is my low spot. So I'm going to be measuring up from there in this direction. But I needed to know what the diameter of my pipe is first. So my pipe is 2.5 inches. So here's the piece of tape that I'm going to end up using. Starting with the lowest point of the tube, for my 2.5-inch exhaust, I needed to go up 2.3 something inches from there in order to give me my 15-degree angle minimum. So I just rounded up and went 2.5 inches to the mark. I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to start at the lowest point, and wherever the tape ends, that's where I'm going to mark it, and that's where I'm going to cut my hole. Here we have our pipe right at the end of the tape where I had said I was going to put it. I center punched it with my spring-loaded center punch. I drilled myself a pilot hole. I'm going to step it up little by little until I get to my 7/8 inch drill bit up there, and then we will be ready to reinstall this and put the O2 bung in place, and then the O2 sensor. All right. Okay, here's the final results. It looks a little marred right now, but really it's not that bad. I deburred it with a rotary tool, and that's why it just looks like that, but actually the hole is actually quite nice. Here is my center mark that I had made right there, and if I were to tip it down, you can see that it comes in at a pretty good 15-degree angle. So yeah, I think the tape situation works out really well. You guys need to give that a try. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to install the clamp-on bung. And at some point in the future, I'll probably take it into a muffler shop and have them weld in the permanent one. But for now, this is what I'm going to do in order to get on the road. So yeah, here we go. So yeah, these band clamps here go on with a 10mm ratchet. I guess I don't know my own strength. Either that or these are really cheapy, because just using my hand tools, remember I told you in the previous video, I don't like using power tools and this kind of stuff. This was just with my hand tools, and I snapped the bolt in half. You can actually see where the thread just came undone. So yeah, if you're gonna do one of these, just be safe, be careful. Because yeah, apparently they snap easy. So now I can't finish my installation. I guess I'm going to the auto parts store again tomorrow. Yay me! And here we are back under the Camaro. Again, the X-pipe extension piece was actually reattached. The hole is placed right where it should be. As you can see, there's just a little bit of space right between my cross member and my transmission housing. Luckily, the transmission housing has a little bit of a kick out right there. You see that? And that's what made it possible. But that only exists on one half of my transmission, the driver's side. And that's why I'm actually able to do what I'm about to do. So let's get started. Well, I went out and bought a couple of new clamps from Napa. And hopefully these will be a little bit stronger than the old ones in order to get this bad boy installed without an issue. We're going to be installing the clamp-on O2 bung with the provided gasket. However, I think the problem is that these gaskets, because these clamps don't attach very strongly, hopefully these new ones will though, that there might be some air leakage going on, and that's why these things are failing on them. So what I'm going to do is I went over to Napa also and bought some of this Permatex. And this is their ultra copper, I believe it is, and it's high temperature, and it's a gasket maker, and it's also sensor safe. So this is the kind of stuff that you should be using for this application. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some to the gasket on both sides in order to get a good bond and a good seal, and I'm going to install it with the clamps. And once it's installed, I'm going to wait 24 hours before I even try to run the car to make sure that the Permatex is actually fully dry. So the bung is now installed, and this is what it's going to look like. As you can see here, what I did is I actually had a little bit too much that I put on, yeah, right, of the high temperature RTV. So what I did is I chased the threads out, cleaned them up, and just cleaned out the outside just to make it look a little nicer. But it wasn't too much that I added. This is about right. Looks good to me. Well, after you remove the cap from the sensor, I was going to say put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads, but as you can see, this O2 sensor already comes with anti-seize on it. I already had my anti-seize ready to go and everything, but I might not need it. Then the question becomes, it's up to you guys whether you want to add a little bit more or not. I think I'm just going to leave it with the anti-seize that it came with. And that's it. We're finally done. The O2 temporary bung is in place. The O2 sensor is now installed with a 7/8 inch wrench. So you can see how the wiring from it comes up and around. And I use an Adel clamp, the Adel clamp, and then I have it zip tied over to one of the vacuum lines that goes to my 2-speed power glide around the corner to more Adel clamps, and then it finally attaches to the other mating end. Wow, yeah, lesson learned though, because it had been a while since I changed one of these things out. Yeah, just leave the cords loose until you are done tightening it down, because it'll want to spin the entire wire assembly. The whole system, the whole mechanism just spins. So not just the nut on the O2 sensor. So yeah, anyway, leave it loose, attach the sucker, and then run your wire. But that should do it for us. Hopefully in a short order, in a few months, I might be able to take this piece of pipe down to the muffler shop and have the O2 bung welded in by a professional and not myself.
And that's it. I'm finally done. The full installation is now complete. Come back. I'm going to have one more video. That last video is going to include the priming of the FiTech Mini, and then I'm going to be doing the setup wizard on the handheld, and we're going to finally try to light this thing. Please cross your fingers for me. I think I did everything right. I did the best that I could. Now you guys understand. Is this a project that you can tackle? I think you can. I think anybody can do it. They're right. I think anybody can do it. You just have to give yourself time and have some patience with it, and don't rush this on a weekend. Do it right. Do it slowly. Don't overdo things, okay? Don't hurt yourself in the process of doing that. Use some jack stands. Use whatever you need to do in order to make sure that you're safe and that you get this done right and it looks good, okay? Take your time on this kind of thing. Come back for the last video. Drop me a like. I actually appreciated it, and it's actually kind of nice. Or don't. It doesn't matter. This will probably be the last few videos that I'm ever going to do. I hope that they've been useful to you guys. Thank you guys for stopping by again and again. I've had a lot more views than I ever thought I was going to get. I really just was doing this, like they say at ACES, for the people. I wanted you guys to know what it is you're getting into and some of the pitfalls, and that, you know what? You can do it. You guys can all do this. So go ahead and purchase it after you look at the video on how this turns out. You guys take care. See you on the next one.